Miami Mall incident was likely a deep state psychological operation to prepare for a bluebeam type alien event. The Spectator magazine puts out an intriguing official disclosure plan from Britain's scientific elite. General Stephen Whiting replaces General James Dickinson as head of US Space Command. A new JP update on strange medical experiments, and Nordics taking over space Arks. Elena Danaan answers questions about using electronics aboard extraterrestrial spacecraft. A new bill proposed to the US Congress to prevent retaliation against civilian pilots for reporting UFOs. And finally, the House Oversight Committee is given a classified UFO briefing, and members attending that briefing are saying that they're going to be able to dig deeper to find the truth behind the UFO phenomenon.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, welcome to the January 13 edition of Exopolitics Today, the week in review. It's not going to be a lot to report on this week. There have been some developments, so I will bring that information to you. So I want to begin with a observation from a ufologist that was able to find that Dr. Eric Davis revealed himself as the source or one of the sources for David Grusch's information about classified UFO crashes. And that's very significant because Eric Davis is the same scientist who was involved with the Admiral Eric Wilson incident going back. The incident was in 1997, but in 2002, Eric Davis and Admiral Wilson discussed what information Wilson had gained about crashed UFOs. He was wanting to learn about corporate reverse engineering programs, and Wilson thought that Davis was someone who had that information. So he was trying to get the information from Davis. Davis played very coy. There are, I think it's like a dozen pages of transcript or more of that conversation. But Eric Davis goes back decades now in terms of a lot of classified programs trying to understand the advanced propulsion technologies that would be used in extraterrestrial spacecraft. So it is no great surprise then that David Grusch got to meet with Eric Davis and that Davis was one of his sources. And so Eric Davis confirms that he was a primary source for David Grusch learning about the UFO crash retrieval programs. So I think that's very interesting in terms of understanding where David Grusch got his information, or some of it anyway, because David Grusch says that he has spoken to up to 40 people or knows about 40 different cases involving crashed UFOs or programs. So that is interesting to learn that one of the sources was Eric Davis. So here we have Elena Danaan raising a very interesting point about this Miami Mall incident. And she points out that she thinks it's that this is a ploy by the Deep State to use holographic technology to pretend or make it look as though there's some kind of alien incursion or aliens are doing some strange things. So she believes, and I assume that is based on some of the information she has gotten from her sources, and we're talking, of course, the Galactic Federation, that this was a combination of using bluebeam technologies, dressed up actors, to really distract people from what's going on and to lay the foundations for a possible false flag event. So I think that's very plausible. This is still that is still a very interesting incident that Elena Danaan described. A lot of people are getting different sources saying that police have been warned off. I mean, I had one source contacted me and said that police had been warned off not to talk about the incident. So if this was just an incident of teenagers fighting and police being called to that incident, I don't think police would have been told not to talk about it. I mean, if you're talking about a number of youths just fighting, that doesn't seem to be that sensitive that police would be told to stand down. So that apparently is what has happened. There have been many other similar reports that officials stepped in and said to cover all this up, and police have been stopped from talking about it. So it's possible that this is just a psyop. And if it is a psyop, I think that matches what happened in the Peru incident in the middle of 2023. And Timothy Alberino did fieldwork in that remote region of Peru, in the Amazonian jungle region, and he interviewed people who were knowledgeable or had the experience with these very tall beings that appeared to be able to levitate and had some kind of exoskeleton where they could absorb direct shots, direct fire from shotguns and other weapons without any injury. And so his conclusion was that this was a psyop. So that, I think, is consistent with possibility that we are in the midst of a kind of deep state program to prepare humanity for some kind of false flag event. So here is something that was very interesting. This was an article in the Spectator, which is a very big British tabloid newspaper, and it reveals an intriguing disclosure plan backed by the British scientific establishment. And it begins by saying, and the author writes, quote, "The supposed disclosure plan goes like this. First, the powers that be will casually tell us that a planet a squillion miles away probably harbors a few bugs in the clouds, something profound but non-threatening." So that would be the first step. Step one, we've discovered life in a different planet, an exoplanet many light years away. It's very likely some kind of bug microscopic life, but we are not alone. So that's not going to rock the boat too much. Then the plan goes on like this, quote, "Once we've grown used to that, we will be told we've encountered a technosignature indicating intelligent non-human life, maybe broadcasting radio waves or sending out probes," which is worrying, but hey, we cope with the microbes. So, this is a very graduated process of disclosure to the unawakened people that are normies, use that phrase, who don't necessarily believe that we're being visited by extraterrestrials. So first announcing that there's been a discovery of biosignatures on some distant exoplanet, and that indicates microbial life. That's not going to be too threatening. Then you go to the next step of saying we've discovered technosignatures, so radio waves, other forms of more advanced communications technologies, or some technosignatures indicative of an advanced civilization. So again, it would be like, well, we've discovered technosignatures of a civilization X light years away. Judging from the biosignatures, we anticipate that they're probably a civilization kind of equivalent to 16th century Europe. again, people wouldn't get too upset by that. So then we go to the final stage. Quote, finally, we will be informed that non-human intelligence walks among us and has been doing so for a while, which is deeply threatening. But seeing as we've got used to the space bugs, then the space radio signals, what does it matter if we have space beings on Earth? Have we just discovered aliens? So there would be a graduated process, and then it would reveal that the extraterrestrials are walking amongst us, which is exactly what contactees, whistleblowers, and researchers have been saying for decades, that they are amongst us. And now, according to Britain's The Spectator, this would be the final step in a graduated series of disclosures that the British scientific establishment are supporting. And why does that matter? Well, if you look at the relationship between Britain and the United States, there's a case to be made, that Britain is very much a country that is very influential behind the scenes in steering US policy. So it is, I think, a good example of the tail wagging the dog, that Britain, the proverbial tail, is wagging the dog, the United States, even though the dog US is much bigger than Britain. I think Britain, because of the role secret societies play and the British monarchy plays in the global control system, then I think this is something that we could probably look at as it's not so much the United States which is dominating Britain, but that behind the scenes, it's Britain dominating the United States. So if Britain's scientific elite are putting forward a graduated disclosure plan, I think that is indicating to the US that, yes, we're ready to move forward with this. It's very interesting. So here's an interview I did with Anthony Sanchez on the Dulce Underground Base. Now, Anthony's a researcher that's been around for many decades. I mean, he goes back to 1989. So he's been doing this for 35 years now, and he had a contact experience at age 5. And so he's has done extensive research and met with some of these kind of whistleblowers that were quite famous in the day. People like Paul Benowitz, Phil Schneider, and other witnesses that he's researched or interviewed, that he was able to find out that there was this incident at Dulce, and he relied on the testimony of a Colonel X. That was the pseudonym he used, and that was, of course, designed to protect the colonel from repercussions for revealing some of the truth of what's happening at Dulce. And so this Colonel X reveals first-hand reports about the classified joint military and extraterrestrial programs being conducted at Dulce. So in his first book, UFO Highway, he focused on the Dulce research. And Dulce is a very significant case because Phil Schneider, 1995, he came out in 1995, talked about his time at Dulce and talked about a firefight that occurred there back, I think it was 1979, where a number of military personnel and scientists were killed by these tall grey aliens. And he described how he lost, I think it was 4 fingers through a ray gun. And also, Anthony Sanchez is also addressing the more contemporary revelations from people like David Grusch. So it is always nice to, and Anthony has just recovered from a serious illness. So great to see him back, and look forward to him putting out new information. And his new book is going to be coming out, UFO Highway 2.0. It's an updated edition of his first UFO Highway book, where he talked about the Dulce base. Okay, so this is where the Hawaii shirt makes a comeback. So you can see my Hawaii shirts. I'm now living in Key West, Florida. We decided to make the move to Key West, and we definitely have missed the tropics. We loved living in Dandridge, Tennessee, right next to Lake Douglas. But the cold weather really did get to us, and the low humidity really did wreak havoc with us. So that wasn't fun. And we felt guided to move to Key West, which is very interesting because there have been a number of people that have been saying, and these are people in the Patriot community plugged into the SG and the others that are saying that Florida is going to be hit in some kind of false flag operation. But we felt guided here, and I believe that things are not nearly as bad as people are told sometimes. And I think Florida is fine, that there's not going to be some kind of false flag event that devastates the state. I think you're going to have your normal hurricane seasons. And, we were used to hurricanes in Hawaii, so we're not too worried about that here. And in fact, here we don't have volcanoes because we actually did leave the Puna region of Hawaii just as the volcano erupted there. Kilauea erupted and overran some of the estates near us. So yeah, definitely Miami, Florida region is going to be a lot of fun for us. And I think there's going to be a lot of good things coming. I think there are these very powerful energies here in the Florida Keys that we did feel. And we think this is a great place to make contact and a great place to connect with the space arc, especially the Atlantic space arc. So we'll see what happens. If I do hitch a ride on that, I'll let you know. But yeah, that you'll be seeing me in more of these Hawaii shirts. I'm glad to be wearing those again. Okay, so now we look at the replacement for General James Dickinson, and he was the guy running Space Force's Special Operations Command. And General Stephen Whiting has a lot of experience in the special operations sphere. So this actually puts him in an excellent position to be able to take over from General James Dickinson, because Space Command is the fulcrum of agreements that have been reached between an Earth alliance comprising at least 14 major spacefaring nations and different extraterrestrial civilizations. There was something called the Jupiter Accords, which I covered back in 2021. And those accords represented a process of negotiation, of galactic diplomacy, if you like, between the Earth's leading spacefaring nations and the different galactic organizations that are here trying to help humanity and our solar system adjust to the new realities of life, where the negative extraterrestrials are no longer influencing us. Now, there are people that still say that negative extraterrestrials are here in control of the planet. Now, the information that I've gotten from multiple sources is that negative extraterrestrials, their space fleets have left. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't still have some negative extraterrestrials on Earth or in subterranean regions of Earth, or hybrids. They have been here for a long time, so they have a right to stay. For the fleets of Draconians and Orion Greys and Praying Mantis that came here and were kind of like spearheading the control system in cooperation with the Deep State, they have had to leave. And so this is where the deep state, the former minions of these different extraterrestrial civilizations, are doing their own thing now, working with whatever regressive extraterrestrials are still on the Earth. So General Whiting, he is someone that's going to hit the ground running. So he is now in charge of the US Space Command, which is different to Space Force. Space Command integrates all of the different military services that have some kind of space component. So whether it's the Navy, whether it's the Army, the Marines, Air Force, or Space Force, they are all combined under Space Command. Of course, the major entity will be Space Force, but still you're going to have the Navy there, the Army there, and they all have their own space contingents or space classified space programs. So Space Command integrates all of those. Space Force is dedicated to training and equipping personnel that are going to be called up to perform missions or be part of Space Command's operations. So that's the way it works in the United States military. Okay, so this is the latest JP update. So JP was exposed to a medical experiment. And in this medical experiment, I mean, he was with a group of 6 soldiers, so Army soldiers. He's taken to some medical facility, and they are told to take these different drugs, and they're hooked up with all these wires to the head and other places, and they're monitored. Their brainwaves are monitored. And then at 2 o'clock, they'd be woken up, and they'd be put through a kind of like a traumatic situation, expected to react in a way that would designate success for the experiment. And that JP never quite worked out what happened, but that the thing kept on happening again and again. So he was wondering if it was some kind of weird time loop, some kind of Groundhog Day, where again and again he'd be taken back, and then he's hooked up, falls asleep, and then he is woken up at 2 o'clock. So he describes going through that process 7 times. Now, the significant thing about this is that JP took a photo of himself hooked up, several photos actually of himself hooked up. So I have those photos. He showed those to me. So I have those. That's physical evidence. And he also took video of the hospital ward. He found his phone and he saw that he had taken a video. So the experiment didn't mess him up psychologically, or at least messed up his memory, because he did not remember taking the video. He remembered taking the photo, but didn't remember taking the video. And he was really surprised when he found it. He said, look what I found on my phone. And so there was video of this kind of hospital ward, where these medical experiments were conducted. So he sent me the video as well. So I have both of those. Unfortunately, JP has not had permission yet. He waits for green light from his military contact. His principal military liaison, who's a senior Air Force officer, typically gives him the green light to release stuff. So until he gets that green light, he holds on to it. So I hope to be able to release that to you, but unless JP gets the green light, I can't do that. Now, this is where I asked JP for some clarification, because there has been some concern expressed about what JP has reported about the Nordics taking over the space Arks, because surface humanity doesn't have their act together. Now, I think it's important to clarify here that JP himself has only observed Nordics on the Atlantic space arc. He has seen the Nordics on the Atlantic space arc, and he sees them activating different technologies, and that they're working with the Earth Alliance, and everything seems to be going well. It's all very positive, nothing to be concerned about. Now, this is where it gets a little strange, because JP was told that the other space arcs have been taken over by the Nordics. So this is where we run into some problems. Because according to Elena Danaan, and I think her information is very reliable in this regard, there are approximately 24 space arcs on the planet, or could be 22, created by 24 cedar civilizations. Maybe it could be the other way around, 24 arcs created by 22 cedar races. And what the cedars do is they typically send a space arc which is fully loaded with all of their technologies. It's organic and it has a crew, and it builds a huge colony and shares advanced technologies with that colony. And over the course of tens of thousands of years, that colony goes through whatever process, and eventually the space arc will play a role in protecting that colony from Earth changes, or it will just remain dormant for some time. But the only people who can activate that space arc are those with the right genetics from that particular cedar race. So you can't have, say, for example, the Alteans who created the space arc that founded the Atlantean civilization, that they go and, say, activate a space arc that's associated with another group of extraterrestrials that, say, created or that were behind this space arc that is buried, say, in Japan under Mount Fuji. And we've had people, Jean-Charles Moyen has visited Japan and Mount Fuji, and he has seen a space arc there. So this to me makes a lot of sense. So the Nordics probably, and according to JP, have access to the Atlantic space arc, but the same Nordics could not access other space arcs, whether we're talking about Japan, whether we're talking about Russia, Europe, China, South America, other parts of the world. They can't access those arcs unless they have the right genetics. And the ones that do have those arcs, the genetics of those arcs are the crew. So this is where it kind of gets a little questionable about, well, what happens if these Nordics, some of these Nordics have an agenda, and they are finding the crew of the space arcs and getting them to activate the arcs so that they can take them over. That concern has been expressed to me. We are trying to find out more information about whether or not that is happening. But certainly the space arcs are a very important thing for humanity. There are multiple space arcs all over the Earth. Nordic extraterrestrials are helping the Earth Alliance deal with the Atlantic space arc, and according to JP's first-hand experiences, everything seems to be on the up and up, and it's all going well. As for other space arcs in other areas, could it be the same Nordics? Could it be other Nordics? Are Nordics even involved in these? I mean, JP may be told things by the military, and I always, as a rule of thumb, always distinguish between what JP is told by others as opposed to what JP sees and experiences with his own eyes and senses. So, so I think this is an issue that we really need to just pay attention to. So that's the more information about the space arcs. Okay, so here's something that I thought was very interesting. Okay, so again, Elena Danaan, she pointed out, and she has answered questions from different people who ask her, well, Elena, if you're really going up there on the Excelsior or up there on the Nibiru and seeing Prince Ea, or hanging out with Thorhan on the Excelsior, and or you're visiting Una on some of the cedar craft, why don't you take photographs? Okay, I mean, that's the question a lot of people have. Why not take photographs? We've got smartphones that you take with you. And, well, what she has observed is that the electronics on the smartphones or the electronics on Earth-made devices simply don't work on the extraterrestrial spacecraft. Now, this is something that I became familiar with doing research on the Eisenhower extraterrestrial meeting in 1954. Now, at that meeting at Edwards Air Force Base, the Air Force learned that electronics do not work on or near extraterrestrial spacecraft. But it simply don't work. So what the solution was for the Air Force was that they found the older generation cameras that were used for the silent film industry, where you had a cameraman cranking cranking some kind of engine that would generate energy for that camera. So that's the way they used to do it during the silent. So the cameraman would be there and do that. So this is what the Air Force did to take film of Eisenhower meeting with these Nordic extraterrestrials in 1954 at Edwards Air Force Base. So it's been known for a long time that electronics don't work. Now, in the case of JP, he has said also when he's next to the craft or close to the craft, his camera, his phone, video doesn't work. But he says when the craft takes off, then it works. And he has taken video and photographs of craft that have landed near him or that he's interacted with. And so that is something you can find that on the webpage I created for JP, where I have some of the photos and some of the videos he shared with me showing these extraterrestrial spacecraft taking off. So that is very important because that matches what Elena Danaan says, that these craft using these advanced magnetic torsion fields, that all Earth electronics just get fried and they cannot work. So yeah, so when she gets taken on these craft, her smartphone just doesn't work. So no point asking her to take a photo or video of it. And because she's teleported up into these crafts, so she can't do what JP does of taking photographs of the craft that land and that he has a physical interaction with. She's teleported up there. So very interesting how electronic spacecraft use these energy systems or have advanced technologies that just don't allow Earth electronics or our present level of technology development in terms of electronics, that they do not work. Okay, so here we have a bill that was proposed in the US Congress, and this was a bipartisan bill called the Safe Airspace for Americans Act that was introduced a couple of days ago. So we're talking sometime around January 9, that was introduced by two representatives, Representative Garcia, Representative Grothman. And the legislation will provide a direct confidential reporting channel for civilian pilots by adapting the widely trusted NASA aviation safety reporting system. So this proposed legislation will protect pilots against retaliation for reporting UAPs, instructs the Federal Aviation Authority to collect and preserve data, investigate and share the reports with the AARO office, that's the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, and also directs the FAA to develop a public engagement strategy to encourage reporting. So this is the legislation that has been proposed. Now, this is where I asked the question, well, is this going to be another bait and switch? We watched this with the UAP Disclosure Act, where it all looked very good on paper. It looked very good in its initial form, but then it was scuttled. It was gutted in the conference committee to reconcile the Senate and the House version. So can something similar happen with this new bill that's just been proposed in the House of Representatives? That's That's very possible. Something we need to be mindful of, that Congress is still a place where the major lobbies can dominate, can shoot down any proposed legislation behind the scenes, which is what happened with the Schumer-Rounds amendment called the UAP Disclosure Act. Behind this, behind the scenes, there was bipartisan. Sorry, it was behind the scenes. You had the military-industrial complex shooting it down, contacting congressmen and telling them, don't let this pass. This is not a good bill, and giving them some talking points for why they were going to vote no on that bill. Okay, so this is where I have to ask the question, regardless of whether or not it is going to pass in its present form, or whether it's going to be kind of like gutted like the UAP Disclosure Act, I think the big problem with a bill like this is that how do you deal with the national security establishment declaring that a UFO sighting is a national security issue and confiscating all the hard evidence? So this is where you have, okay, so you might have people, pilots and crew reporting they saw a UFO, they were flying, civilian pilot, civilian crew, they saw a UFO flying, they report this as requested or along with the protocols, but then all the evidence for that can be confiscated because some agency cites national security concerns. And so you have, whether it's CIA, NSA, Office of Naval Intelligence, Air Force Office of Special Investigations, you can have any intelligence agency or any military intelligence group going into the FAA and saying, we have to confiscate this. Now, this is exactly what happened back in an incident that was described by John Callahan, a former senior official with the FAA, and he describes this 1986 incident involving a UFO where the pilot reported it, and it got a lot of mainstream coverage, but then all the evidence was withdrawn. And so the pilot and the crew were left dangling with no support because there's no physical evidence supporting that this UFO really did happen. And so the same thing could happen here. So that despite the noble intent from the congressmen and people lobbying for this bill, people such as Americans for Safe Airspace, which was created by Ryan Graves, I think they have a noble intent, but I think the practicality is that as long as the national security establishment can come in and say, well, this is a national security issue and we can confiscate the evidence and you cannot stop us. Unless you have a way of dealing with that, then yes, you can have pilots and crews being left stranded if they report a UFO sighting that has national security implications. So this is where we get to a tweet concerning two theorists. This is the one who puts out a lot of very interesting information in his Twitter feed, and he described two theories by two prominent UFO researchers. One is John Keel, and he said the UFO phenomenon is frequently reflective. That is, the observed manifestations seem to be deliberately tailored and adjusted to the individual beliefs and mental attitudes of the witnesses. End quote. So this is suggesting that a lot of what people see in terms of UFOs, extraterrestrials associated with those UFOs, that this is very subjective, that it's very much influenced by people's belief systems and their attitudes, and so that can vary greatly. So we're talking about a phenomenon that is very much a product of the subjective perspective of the observer with something happening which is unknown. And that's the key, I think, here, that John Keel and Jacques Vallee, they both base their theories on people interacting with this unknown phenomenon And because their subjective belief systems are so different and vary, they come away with very different opinions about this UFO phenomenon. And Jacques Vallee, he said, UFOs have been seen throughout history and have consistently received or provided their own explanation within the framework of each culture. End quote. So very similar. And I think this is the point that the one is making, that John Keel and Jacques Vallee, their theories coincide very closely, that here you have the human mind trying to make sense of this unknown phenomenon. Okay, so fair enough. If you're looking at this UFO phenomenon as something that is unknown, where humans try to grapple and interpret that using very different subjective belief systems and attitudes. So I can totally understand why they would say that. Now, the problem is, and there is a problem with this, that the problem is that it is what Jacques Vallee and John Keel are offering are theories based on allegedly unknown phenomenon. That the UFO phenomenon is unknown, by definition, unidentified flying object. So it is unknown. So here we are, we're offering you these theories about this unknown phenomenon that is predicated on people having very subjective beliefs and attitudes, which means that the way they describe and communicate this unknown phenomenon is going to be very different. Now, the problem with this, and there's a big problem with this, is that many UFOs and flying sources are not unknown. They are known. Problem is that the military intelligence community has been interacting with visitors from other worlds arriving in technologically advanced spacecraft. So they know that the UFO phenomenon is not a UFO, because the UFO term itself is a psyop. I mean, this is the thing, which is why when I began doing my research and began writing about this field in 2003, I did not use the term ufology. I avoided using the term UFOs, because UFOs is a deeply psychological operation. And what we're seeing from John Keel and Jacques Vallee is precisely why I do not describe myself as a ufologist, because a ufologist, by definition, is someone that is interested in the unknown. I am not interested in the unknown. I'm interested in extraterrestrial spacecraft that are visiting our Earth, communicating with private citizens and with the military intelligence community and sharing technologies. That's what I'm interested in. And I call that exopolitics. So exopolitics is a political science based on the key political actors, processes, and institutions associated with extraterrestrial life. That's not subjective. It's just like politics is not subjective. I mean, you look at what's happening in the world around us. I mean, would you say, well, what's happening in Israel, Palestine, is something that is subject to our interpretive biases and filters, so we cannot know that, well, that the Hamas committed an atrocity against Israeli civilians, or that Israeli soldiers are committing atrocities against Palestinian civilians? I mean, these are atrocities. Both sides are committing atrocities. Both sides are doing things that violate international law. We don't call that subjective. We don't say, well, someone looking at that, while looking at what the Hamas are doing to the Israelis, or looking at what the Israelis are doing to the Palestinians, well, these are subjective experiences that are contingent on our belief systems. No, because these are observable phenomena, and we can use the conceptual social scientific tools for understanding these phenomena. Same thing with the extraterrestrials. They're visiting our Earth. They're interacting with us. There's nothing unknown about that. Maybe their agendas are unknown. We can speculate about their agendas, certainly. But the fact that they are arriving in spacecraft, interacting with private citizens and with military personnel and intelligence personnel, sharing technologies, getting access to bases. These are objective facts. This is not subjective. And I think this is where I take issue with people that support Jacques Vallee and John Keel as providing us an answer or the correct approach to the UFO phenomenon. It is not the correct approach because the phenomenon is not unknown. That is part of a psychological operation that was implemented from the very beginning from this psychological strategy board that was created going back to 1952. That was a psychological operation. And the UFO term was introduced to replace the earlier term flying saucers. And I think the flying saucer term was more accurate because at the very least, it was a descriptive term for the majority of the craft that were being seen and that were assumed to be piloted by extraterrestrials. And now we have reverse engineered flying saucer craft, so they might not be extraterrestrial. So what we have here is a choice between intellectually appealing, overly complex origin theories about the unknown, UFOs, and straightforward eyewitness accounts of physical contact with extraterrestrial visitors down to alien spacecraft, communications, meetings, and agreements with extraterrestrials, etc. So I think we need to get away from this theory, and I think this is something that the deep state would like people to believe, that what we are dealing with is an unknown phenomenon. It is by no means an unknown phenomenon. That is what the deep state wants you to believe. It is well known that these are extraterrestrial craft that either come from deep space or from the inner earth or from under the oceans. Those are the three primary locations that these craft come from. Well, you know, we could also bring in the interdimensional because I think that is also a possibility. So we don't need to be exclusive and dismiss this interdimensional hypothesis. We just need to point out that it's not the only explanation for what is happening here. So finally today, well, this is Friday. I'm recording this Friday, and this is the House of Representatives Oversight Committee was given a classified briefing from the intelligence community's Inspector General, and he gave them a briefing about UFOs or UAPs. Now, what you have here is an interview with Tim Burchett, and he gives an interview where he describes what he learned from this. And the main thing that he learned from this classified briefing is that what David Grusch had to say was legitimate. So in other words, he's confirming that the information they've been getting from David Grusch concerning the existence of downed spacecraft, crashed spacecraft that have been secretly located in corporate facilities and are being studied, that these are legitimate, and that the existence of non-human intelligence as well, so that is legitimate. And so there have been other members of the House Oversight Committee that have made similar claims after attending this classified briefing, and what they have said is that this has strengthened their resolve to get to the truth now. They feel that, and this was the point that Timothy Burchett made, that now he believes that he has a clearer focus on where to look. And that makes all the difference in terms of getting to the truth. So the Congress, this House Oversight Committee, probably they're going to be having more hearings in the future, and because of this classified briefing, they have a better idea of where to look, what witnesses to ask, and so we'll see how much progress they make in the next committee meeting they have with the House Oversight Committee to share with us the testimonies of any witnesses, whistleblowers that are willing to come forward and talk about these. So that's it for the week in review for January 13. I'm glad you could join me. Please remember to like and share this video. It really does make a difference. The algorithms on YouTube do suppress videos like this from going viral. So you recommending it is all the difference. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to next week. Aloha.
You have been listening to Exopolitics today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.